Milé divačky a milí diváci, milovníci vědy a dokumentárního filmu. Vítám vás na 56. ročníku festivalu Akademia Film Olomouc a na rozhovoru k soutěžnímu filmu Poslední artefakt. Mé jméno je Dominik Vontor a jsem asistentem Industry for Science a mám velkou radost, že zde můžu přivítat spolurežisérku filmu Jamie Jacobsen. Welcome, Jamie.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining and thank you also for your beautiful film. My first question is obviously connected to the topic of it because it's a very specific and niche, because it's about redefinition of the kilogram, and you managed to produce very entertaining movie. So I would like to know, what was your first intention?
Yeah, Dominique, that's a really great point. To be honest, a lot of my films have to do with how people interact with the environment and just culture in general. So to make a film about a hunk of metal, which is the kilogram, basically an inanimate object, is something I never would have dreamed of making a documentary about. And really, it was just because the opportunity was there. Ed Watkins, my colleague, we actually went to film school together many years ago at Montana State University, and he saw a call for proposals that was published by the United States government, by our national laboratory. It's called the National Institute of Science and Technology. And they basically had a $500,000 grant, US dollars, that was offered for a film team that could basically propose an idea for making a film about the redefinition of the kilogram. They really felt like this was a historic moment for humankind, that we were changing the way we measure literally everything, and that would have profound impacts on our society. So they felt like it was important to document this and to publish this effort and to educate the American public and the world about this endeavor. So we just said, we had actually gone to a program, we were trained to make films about science as part of a science and natural history filmmaking master's degree program. So we felt like, okay, if anyone can make a film about this topic, it should be us, right? This is what we were trained to do. And like, why not? Let's go after it. It's a really great opportunity to make a beautiful science film. So we put together a proposal and we were selected, and we won the grant and, made the movie.
That's very interesting genesis of the film, and I'm really wondering if you or Ed, the co-director, have some kind of scientific background, or you were interested in this just because of the program you studied at the university.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We both have a background in science. The program we did, actually, it took people with at least an undergraduate college degree in some sort of scientific discipline and trained them to become filmmakers and visual storytellers. So my background's actually in environmental studies and art. So I was always looking for this way to combine art and science. And, this particular topic was really, I must say, a huge challenge for me, because it was, a really technical area of science that's not very well known, metrology. And, we had to interview physicists and chemists from around the world across a variety of different cultures. And they're used to, talking here with people, with maybe 5-10 people on the planet that understand the science that they do and the work that they do, and trying to figure out how to collaborate with them to tell the story in a way that pretty much everyone can understand was a tremendous undertaking, I think, and it really stretched the limits of my creativity and my work as a storyteller. But that being said, it was a wonderful challenge, and I really enjoyed the process.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I could imagine a scientific documentary about kilogram and Planck's constant and all these abstract films being too full of 3D models and graphs and formulas. But your film is very entertaining, and my question is, how did you manage to balance this kind of being entertaining and also being scientifically accurate?
It was tricky, I think. I mean, we knew as storytellers that we had to come up with a way to visualize the science. And, as science communicators, we employ a variety of different techniques to do that. Two of the key techniques we used in the last artifact were humor. There's a lot of kind of witty words and plays on concepts and the visuals and how these things interact in the film with the narration and the scenes that you see. And then we also tried to use visual metaphors. And early on in the project, we actually envisioned kind of more of a flashy, like 3D animation, like really fancy graphics. And then we started going to all the different national laboratories that we filmed at, and we met the people and we saw the spaces, and we realized that they are just a very unique, quirky, intriguing group of people. Like someone who devotes their life to measuring something over and over and over and over is just a really kind of unique type of person. And we felt like the film needed a more playful approach that didn't really fit with this sort of like fancy stylized imagery. So we decided, specifically in order to illustrate some of the concepts that we talk about in the movie, we brought children into the studio and we had them play with everyday objects, toys basically, that illustrated, how different machines or experiments worked, or, touched on broader scientific principles that we were trying to convey as filmmakers and as storytellers. So that, was a way that we, instead of using graphs or models or animations, we were able to, we had scientists talking about how atoms were structured inside the silicon sphere, for example, which is this kind of fancy crystal ball, and how they're organized. And one of the scientists actually that we interviewed in Germany came up with a metaphor of arranging oranges inside a truck. And that illustrated how the atoms were arranged. So we had literally like a little girl playing with this toy truck and putting in oranges and measuring it. And, this really kind of brought these ideas to life for the audience in a really fun, playful, accessible way.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I need to point out that actually it's both entertaining but still artistic in a way. And I'm wondering if you can tell us more about the filming techniques. How big was the crew? How long did you shoot?
Yes, definitely. Well, the entire process, I should say it was a multi-year project. We actually applied for the grant, I think, in late 2016. And in early 2017, we found out that we had been chosen to make the film. So we started flying around to the different laboratories back when flying everywhere was really possible. Thank goodness this happened pre-pandemic, because we had a lot of international travel. And we started, really filming right away. And we ultimately spent 2 years filming. We went to 6 different countries: the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Japan, multiple times to kind of follow the scientists and the experiments and meetings and events as they unfolded. And so we finished filming really late 2018, I think. And at that point, we were in the edit bay in 2019, putting the movie together, trying to edit together thousands and thousands of hours of footage and testimony. I think we interviewed over 25 different scientists around the globe. So we had a large cast of characters and so much content to choose from. And then at that point really began some of the hard work of figuring out how to visualize some of these concepts. So we actually in 2019 started filming again in the studio because we realized we needed more imagery, more ways of visualizing for the audience. And we wanted to kind of fit with this stylistic aesthetic of humor and playfulness and these fun, colorful scenes that we decided, were part of our visual aesthetic. And so we actually finished editing the film, and really it was kind of coming out of the master being created in early 2020. And this was, I think, about February. We were getting ready to release the movie, and coronavirus hit the world, and we didn't really know what to expect at that point. So this is, I guess, the 4th year we were starting distribution of the project, and really have had a lot of wonderful opportunities at festivals just like yours to showcase the film virtually with audiences around the globe. And it's really been I've been so happy with what we have been able to do, given the constraints that we're all facing in terms of theatrical viewings and things like that. We've still found ways to connect. So now in 2021, we're in year 5 of the project, of it still, getting it out into the world and connecting it to people. So it's been a long but wonderful journey.
Yeah, we are very glad that your film is in our competition, and I believe that we would talk about the distribution of the film a little bit later. But now I would like to ask about this grant that you received. It was funded by the institution, the scientific institution, and I'm just wondering if you had some kind of like a scientific background from the institution. How did you do the research? Did they provide you scientists and these things?
Yes, really great question. We did have a scientific advisory board. It was actually it was written into the grant that we had complete artistic and creative control, editorial control, but that we needed to run, scripts and the ultimate edit for the film by an international panel of scientific experts that would ensure that the content was accurate, because that was really important, because one of the goals, of course, of the grant and the project was to educate people about the redefinition of the international system of units and of the kilograms. So it needed to be really on point. So we did a lot of research. My colleague Ed Watkins he used to be a science writer for Science, and he really drove a lot of our research process, I should say. So I think our team comes with that expertise, but we also worked really closely with the people that we were interviewing to make sure we were, sharing the correct information, collecting the right testimony when we did the interviews, and then the scientific advisory panel, which was made up of metrologists who were familiar with the project and the science, and they came from different countries and different cultures. So we felt that, the perspectives were balanced, and we had just really, I think it was 6 people total that advised us on that process.
Well, in your film, you are also focusing on the work of BIPM, which is the International Bureau of Weights and Measurement. And I'm wondering if you can tell us what is this institution's mission besides having the last artifact in their basement?
I guess I would say I'd have to kind of call them up, but I'd be really curious to hear how things have changed for them since the redefinition, because surely they're entering a new era in how they engage with the world. And, in the past, they were really the keepers of the kilogram. The kilogram was actually physically located on their premises, and laboratories around the world would calibrate their standards in conjunction with this mass standard that was held at BIPM. They really collaborate between, they disseminate knowledge and information between all of the different national laboratories around the world, and bring international annual conferences and meetings where the scientists who are working in metrology come together and connect. So I think, they will always, as far as I understand, have an educational role and are working to generate new knowledge surrounding the science of measurement and ensuring global communication and collaboration. So I think that role will stay the same and will continue to move forward. But in some ways, I think the filmmaking process itself and the redefinition itself, maybe I could say perhaps made some people a bit nervous at the BIPM, because it did change their role, and they're having to redefine themselves, and sort of the role they have as a leader in this endeavor is now a bit different. So I'll be curious to hear from them how they're embracing that and how they're taking that role into the new century, so to speak, or these upcoming years.
But they still do have the Grand K in their basement, right? In the vault.
They do, yeah. I don't know where that will go in the future. Other historic pieces of measurement, that have been used before this mass standard, are housed in museums. So I don't know if it will become a museum piece, if it will stay at the International Bureau of Measurements forever, if they will allow the public to view it, or if they will continue to study it for some time. My guess is that it's still going to be limited access for some time, because I think there's a lot to study with just how it is in its environment. And I imagine it will probably stay at the BIPM for quite some time. But for now, it can be seen in our film. That's one cool thing. A lot of the renditions that are available online, a lot of the photographs of the IPK, as it's called, or the Grand K, are stunt doubles, because scientists have tried to minimize its interaction with outside elements and with people and photographers, so it's very rarely photographed. So, but we were able to coordinate with the BIPM to film it when they were actually opening the safe, and the real deal can be seen, at least in that format.
Well, that was basically my next question. If we see the real Grand K in your film, or if it is a stunt, maybe can you tell us, if it is not a secret, who are those 3 men who have the key to enter the vault with the real Grand K in the museum, in the BIPM in France?
Oh, goodness. I'm not sure if I can mention that or not. To be honest, this is kind of something that really intrigued us about the kilogram and about this story, as we were doing the research and learning more about it, was kind of the mystique and the myth and the secrecy that surrounds this object. And yes, there are 3 key holders that live in different places and come from different avenues of life that hold the keys, and they all have to come together at the very same time to open the safe. And it's like something out of a fairy tale, I think. But that's really for the BIPM to disclose, I think. Not me.
Well, they probably cannot even travel in the same plane, right?
I imagine not. No, I don't think so.
So you and your crew attended the Versailles conference about the redefinition of the kilogram. Maybe can you tell us, what was the atmosphere in there, and what was it for you to witness this happening live?
Yeah, so this moment of the vote at Versailles was when the world really gathered. Representatives from every nation were present to, or almost every nation were present to vote on whether to redefine the kilogram, and with it the International System of Units, or the SI as it's called. And because of that, there was so much just energy and excitement in the room, because I think everyone who was there just felt like they were part of this historic moment. They were part of something bigger than themselves, something that would go down in the history books, so to speak. And for me as a filmmaker, it was really just a privilege to be part of something that so few people actually get to experience. And I think it was also particularly special. I mean, I can't imagine how special it must have been for people who have devoted their entire lives and careers, decades and decades, to working towards this moment. The sense of pride and accomplishment and euphoria that they must have felt in seeing this journey come to fruition. For me as a filmmaker, what really caught me was seeing people from all different cultures and countries across the world coming together to agree on something and vote towards some positive change that would benefit human society everywhere. And I feel like, we live in a very polarized climate, politically speaking, and there's so few things that we as a species seem to be able to agree on. And this was one of them. Like, we were actually witnessing that, and it was really, really beautiful.
Wow, I wish I could be there as well, because it's really such a historical moment for science and for how the world works. But I think that for a human being, it's not such a big deal. It's not something that we would consider important. Maybe someone just didn't even notice this change, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really, at the very end, we tried to, in the interviews, talk to some of the scientists about, well, what can the person on the street really observe any of these changes, or what does this mean for us? Do we even notice, And it was kind of quite funny to hear them saying, well, if all goes as well, no one will ever notice. Everything will just carry forth as smoothly as it is now. And that's good. But I think what's really exciting is this idea of what might come out of it. Prior scientific discoveries relating to our international system of units, for example, one of the key discoveries that came out of that, or I guess developments, I should say, is GPS, global positioning systems that our cell phones use. We use it for driving and things like that to calculate where to go and distances, and that came about because of how we define length, the meter, so to speak, resulted in these technologies that now everyone basically has in their pockets, in their cell phones, and it influences how we interact with the world. So we don't really know exactly what sort of technologies or developments or inventions will come from the redefinition of the kilogram. We'll have to see in coming years what comes of it and how we may be impacted. But I remember some of the scientists, specifically, I think Alan Steele, the head of the Canadian National Institute, was speculating that it might really have a significant impact in medicine and in individualized medicine, and being able to, come up with, you can just measure more and more precise quantities of drugs and how, these kind of chemicals are interacting in everybody's body in a different way, depending on their chemistry. And, metrology may play a role in our health in a big way in coming years. So I think that's exciting to think about. And I look forward to just following this over time and seeing, maybe when I'm old and in my rocking chair one day, I'll be able to say, oh, this was because of the redefinition of the kilogram, something that we take for granted years to come. So we'll have to see.
Well, since you were involved in the film about kilogram, have you noticed on yourself thinking about the kilograms around you differently?
Yeah, I think I started to appreciate what goes into making everyday objects that we use, that there's a really complex system of measurement and manufacturing and just standards that are applied to all the products that we use to make them safe, to make them consistent. And so it really made me appreciate just all the physical things in the world that I can see and use on a daily basis at a lot deeper level. And just, I think, have an appreciation for also, more than, say, like physical objects, but also kind of the abstract side of science, that just, it increased my sense of wonder and awe for the scientific process, for research, for the quest for the unknown, for discovery, by being able to witness some of that and experience some of that. So I think I just have a greater respect for scientists as a whole and the work they do to inform and better our lives.
Well, now I would like to ask more about the funding of the film, because it was supported by the National Institute of Standard and Technology, right? And I'm just curious if it is common in the United States that those scientific institutions are supporting audiovisual formats, and how they popularize the science.
To my knowledge, I could be wrong about this, but I think the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is our national metrology lab, I think this was the first for them. They had some staff that were working in their communication department that were passionate about filmmaking and documentaries, and I think just knew this could be a really compelling way to communicate with the public beyond kind of more traditional ways of informing people about the redefinition. Maybe, obviously it was coupled with other efforts, whether it's newspaper articles or things like that, other forms of press and publication. But I think they thought a documentary, they had specifically seen a movie called Particle Fever, which was published, I think it came out around 2013, and it highlights scientists' quests around the world to search for the so-called God particle. And this film did quite well in the festival circuit, and I think just had a significant impact. And it was one of the first sort of documentaries that really popularized physics. And I think they saw this movie and they thought, well, gosh, could we do something like that for the kilogram? Maybe we could. And they dreamed up this idea, and they were able to get federal funding, from I think it was from the Department of Commerce of the United States government to do this. But, as far as that specific entity, which is called NIST for short, doing audiovisual communication, I think it's not super common. We do have another institute called the National Science Foundation, and they actually do support a lot of filmmaking endeavors. Most often it's tied to other scientific research. So I teach right now at Colorado State University, which is about an hour north of Denver, Colorado. We're based in Fort Collins, and we're, a large scientific research institution. And many researchers who work in the sciences across campus will write grants to get funding for their research, and then they will write in engagement or outreach components, which sometimes entail, visual storytelling and media making. So as a filmmaker, you can kind of strategize and try and align yourself with scientists who are going after grant funding at NSF, it's called, the National Science Foundation. And if you're part of kind of the engagement outreach part of a grant, very often they are very supportive of filmmaking and multimedia endeavors. So there are definitely possibilities there, which is really exciting to consider as a filmmaker. And I think now with the pandemic, we're definitely kind of in hard times in terms of just budgets have been cut across the board, and the visual arts and the performing arts have really suffered. So I think it remains to be seen how, as a society and a culture, we come out of the pandemic, and are we going to support storytelling and artistry and filmmaking? Are we going to support science? Like, how are we going to, think about these things moving forward as a society and as a culture? And I think that remains to be seen. There's a lot of kind of recalibrating and adjusting going on right now, and we're kind of treading water, sort of waiting to see how are we going to emerge, what's going to happen. But there are some opportunities that filmmakers have really been taking advantage of in terms of getting their work funded and out to the public in new ways through these collaborations with scientific institutes and with scientists.
I think that a good example how to work with the film is your cooperation with PBS Montana. They have so many articles and videos and clips on their website for the last artifact. Can I ask you, how did this public broadcasting service cooperated with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, PBS, which is our public broadcasting, I'm forgetting if it's system or service. I forget the acronym. I just say PBS, but it's our public television nationwide service. And we, we're so lucky to be able to collaborate with Montana PBS, because they've really been, I think, at the forefront of not only partnering with independent filmmakers to create documentaries that are showcased within kind of the state of Montana for a local public television audience, but also, pitching those films to the national system to show them nationally, allowing us opportunities to submit them to festivals around the world to gain international viewership. And we were really fortunate with this particular project, where we had contacts with PBS International, which is the international division of PBS, and they sell documentary programming to over 2,000 clients across the globe. So the other public television systems in other countries, like, for example, the BBC, which is the public broadcasting service in the United Kingdom, just bought The Last Artifact. So it's also going to be showing in the UK, which we're thrilled about, because a lot of Ed Watkins, actually my colleague on the film, who co-produced and directed it with me, his wife, Stephanie Watkins, and their friend and colleague, Ben King, they worked on producing, directing, and writing and editing the film. And they're all based in Bristol in the United Kingdom. So it's so great to see that it will also be really shared in that country and many others that PBS International is networking with. They also facilitate VOD, video on demand deals. So in the past, one of my previous films called Finding Traction, it was featured on Netflix for 3 years, and it's still on Amazon Prime. So people across the globe in hundreds of countries can stream the films. Mm-hmm. So we're hoping that maybe, I mean, The Last Artifact is such a niche topic. I guess it remains to be seen if these big streaming giants will see value in picking up this type of story. But I hope that it will be available online and accessible. So really, to kind of answer your question, Dominique, I think Montana PBS has been doing a great job of creating compelling documentary content that is released multi-platform and internationally, and really seeing just how far these films can go and having them both have a local impact, but also a broad international impact. And that's just so exciting. And I think it's just a great way to share content with as many people as possible and have a broad impact. So we were just really pleased that they were our partner in this project. Mm. They also, I should say, maybe they have an educational division as well. So maybe you saw they have PBS Learning Media, and we also partnered with that division of PBS to create short clips that educators around the globe could use in classrooms. So there's, I think, 12 short videos that were created, clips from The Last Artifact that are now online, and anyone can go and access them. And if, someone is teaching high school chemistry or physics and wants to connect lesson plans relating to the redefinition to a specific excerpt in the movie, those resources are available. So I think that's a really other way that we're connecting with the next generation who are learning about the science that's featured in the film. And the movie's been repurposed for educational avenues as well because of PBS.
I think this is just fantastic to have this film being publicly shared and accessible to the students and the teachers and everyone. I know that you graduated from the university program of natural and science documentary filmmaking. And this is something we don't have in the Czech Republic. And I personally think that the quality and quantity of science filmmaking should be increased. Maybe can you tell us more about how it is being taught in the United States?
Yes, well, I can speak a little to that. The program was established, I believe, in 2000, so a little over 20 years ago. And at the time, one of the director of the program, who had the original kind of vision for creating higher quality science content where we have people who have a background in science who are trained as storytellers. And that seemed like really the ideal background where, you're really putting the scientific knowledge together with the artistic process and training people to operate in that realm. And I know his name was Ronald Tobias. He actually had, I think, produced movies for the Discovery Channel, which is another network, cable network that we have in the United States. And the Discovery Channel provided an initial seed funding or grant to start our program at Montana State University, which is based in Bozeman, Montana. And at the time, it was one of the few, if only, programs in the world that really did this. I think since then, we've seen many other universities who are really interested in science communication and are looking at ways to combine kind of science and filmmaking and developing new degree programs. But yeah, in 2000, it was really at the forefront of this new development. And that funding from Discovery Channel really made the program possible. And I know the funding was limited. I think those running that program, I don't know the inner workings of it since I was a student and time has passed, but I think they've had to find ways to sustain it over time once that, seed funding ran out through the university budget and those kind of broader operations. So I'm not exactly sure how it's funded at the moment, but that was how it was originally created and started.
So does this program and this school connects the students with the scientists?
Yeah. Well, at least I can speak to my time when I was a student, and I studied there from 2005 to 2008. So I was cohort 5, kind of in the earlier years. And at that time, and I think now still, the program has a lot of relationships with different organizations and institutes that specialize in science, like NASA, for example, our space national space program. We routinely have students and graduates from the National Science and Natural History Filmmaking Program interning there and working there and producing video content about space. We've also had a number of our students and graduates work for the Smithsonian Institute for museums in Washington, D.C. in particular, scientific museums and organizations. A handful of us, since it is an MFA, which is considered a terminal degree in the arts, have gone on to become professors, filmmaking professors like myself. And then many other folks have become independent producers, independent, freelance cinematographers, editors, who oftentimes work for other channels, Science Channel, BBC, Discovery, National Geographic is a big one, who produce content for these other clients, or just independently. There's definitely been, I think, strong connections as well with organizations like, say, the Nature Conservancy or other environmental organizations that are both national and international in scope, where they're looking for scientific content that can be shared via nonfiction, video and media. So students and graduates from our program have found work and collaborations there. And I think it's been really a mix of the programming itself having these relationships built, and students also forging these connections on their own. And the alumni network we have, I think, has also played an instrumental role in that people, kind of get in and, establish themselves working at these different agencies or organizations. And then they create more opportunities to bring future cohorts and kind of the next generation to carry on the tradition. So those relationships are really important. We all kind of help bring each other up and leverage more power behind science documentary filmmaking.
I know that you are now working for the Center of Science Communication at Colorado University. Can you tell us more about its mission? What do you work on in the center?
Yeah, a great question. I'm really privileged. I'm in my second year as a tenure track professor at Colorado State University. And part of my position, I'm in the Department of Journalism and Media Communication. So basically, faculty have a background in this area, but we have a really strong specialty in science communication, many of us. And before I was hired, there was a group of faculty that had a vision for creating a center for science communication within our department and more largely speaking within the university, where we could really do kind of a couple different things. Our mission's really 3-part in that it focuses on research, on teaching, and in engagement. So we're looking at basically exploring and promoting research-driven strategies to study the science behind science communication. Essentially, like, how do you go about communicating science? What is an effective way to communicate science? And really understanding that on an intellectual level, and then being able to put that into both our pedagogy as instructors, like training the next generation of science communicators, how to be effective science communicators, and then engaging stakeholders across the university community, across our local community, and beyond, really around the world, in communicating science effectively. So that entails, both traditional kind of scientific research, creative projects, connecting our students to projects, providing that training, and really just facilitating a better understanding of science and communication of scientific processes and issues. So it's a new center, and kind of to come full come back to your question, full circle here, is I was hired to help build and create the center. So it's really in its early stages. Right now, we're working on our branding. We're working on redesigning our website, creating media about ourselves, who we are, what we do. I'm working with a group of students and staff and faculty to really just build this effort. And I'm excited to see how far we can take it. I mean, I think one thing that I'm really excited about is the possibility, since we do have students who are studying documentary filmmaking, who are like film, video, media production track within our broader journalism and media communication major, you know, a subset of them are really passionate about science communication. And I think connecting them and their work, the work they're doing with like your work, your festival that focuses on raising science and science documentaries, I think there's a lot of possibilities for international collaborations. And I'm just thrilled that we're building these connections with festivals across the globe and our faculty and students. So I look forward to following up with you, long story short, you know, in the coming years as we continue to build the center and see how we might be able to continue to work together.
I wish you very good luck with the center, and I can't wait to team up with AFO in the following years. My last question, Jamie, is besides launching the center, do you even have time for more filmmaking? And if you do, what are you working on right now?
You know, in the future, I really, you know, one area that I'm really passionate about that I'm actually, I guess I should say at this point, looking for the means to make a larger project, is I'm very passionate about climate change and how it connects to displacement and migration and human society. And it's an issue that in Colorado, you know, has really impacted us. Last year, in 2020, we had the worst wildfire season ever on record in the history of our state. The sky was just black. You couldn't go outside. It was a really terrible thing because if you stayed inside, you're worried about getting the coronavirus. If you went outside, you're breathing in this smoke that is incredibly dangerous and hazardous to human health. So it really raised my interest in this issue in climate change and in pursuing a project in this area. That remains to be seen. So that's kind of like idea, concept, sort of still looking for the means. And I do, you know, and it's actually kind of a related research area that I also pursue in addition to science communication is I used to teach abroad in Beirut, Lebanon. And while I was overseas, I was there from 2013 to 2016. I became really involved in just trying to understand and grapple with the Syrian refugee crisis and the global refugee crisis. And my students at that time, my Lebanese students, went out into their neighborhoods and interviewed Syrian refugees and shared their stories within our classroom space. And when I returned to Montana, where I was living previously, in 2016, I was able to meet a group of Venezuelan families who had immigrated to Montana, who were fleeing the Venezuelan crisis. There's actually a lot of connections between Venezuela and Lebanon as it happens, you know, in terms of just the social, political, economic hyperinflation, you know, health crises that both nations are facing. And you know, my children's lives, I should say, became intertwined with the lives of some Venezuelan children in Montana, where I used to live. And so I'm working right now on an interactive documentary that will feature some of their stories about displacement and migration and leaving home and grappling with these changing identities and moving across cultures. So that project is in production right now. I think it'll look a bit different because we envision it being interactive, versus a lot of my projects up till now, including The Last Artifact, have been feature-length documentaries, more for television broadcast. So this is kind of a new territory, new methodologies in documentary that I'm exploring. And it's a really kind of very personal topic that it doesn't have large grant funding, this project. It's more just like my life experience and personal connections I have and people who inspired me, whose stories I want to find a way to share. And in the United States, in addition to, you know, climate change, I think one of the top issues that we're facing right now have to do with immigration and perspectives on, racism. We have a lot of just conflict and violence playing out in our society right now. So I think this project is really sort of aiming at creating bridges across cultures and communities and fostering dialogue and understanding. So that's my current project, and look forward to seeing where it goes.
Wow, Jamie, it all sounds so interesting. We look forward as well. One more time, thank you very much for joining the Q&A. For me to add, your co-director as well. We are very happy that your film, The Last Artifact, is in our main international competition.
Thank you so much for having me, Dominique, and for featuring The Last Artifact at AFO. We're just so pleased to be a part of your event and festivals, and thank you so much for everything.
A děkuji i vám, našim divákům, že jste sledovali tento rozhovor, a srdečně vás zvu ke sledování filmu Poslední artefakt, ale i dalších filmů z naší mezinárodní soutěže na online.watchandknow.cz. Pro AFO 56, Dominik Vontor.